Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, 1990, is a pivotal work that challenges conventional understandings of gender. As a feminist philosopher and theorist, Butler scrutinizes the intersections of gender, sex, and identity, proposing radical ideas about how these categories are constructed and maintained through societal norms. One of the central concepts of the book is the idea of performativity, which asserts that gender is not something that one is, but rather something that one does. This work laid the groundwork for the post-structuralist approach to gender studies, fundamentally reshaping feminist theory and sparking a wide range of discussions about identity and its fluidity. Butler's exploration of gender starts with an analysis of the feminist movements that preceded her work, particularly the second wave of feminism that flourished in the 1960s and 70s. While this wave focused on the essentialist notion of gender as biological and fixed, Butler critiques this idea, arguing instead that gender is socially constructed. She takes issue with the idea that there is an inherent, natural link between one's sex and one's gender identity. Instead, she argues that gender is a complex set of social practices that are regularly performed and repeated. The theory of performativity. One of Butler's most important contributions to feminist theory is her concept of gender performativity. According to Butler, gender is not a stable identity or trait, but rather a set of actions, gestures, and language that are repeated over time to produce the effect of a coherent identity. Gender is performed through these repetitions, and the performance itself constitutes gender as real. This idea challenges the idea that there is an essence of gender that exists prior to its performance. Instead, Butler argues that gender is produced through repeated acts, which means that it is always in flux, contingent, and open to subversion. Butler's concept of performativity builds on the ideas of post-structuralist thinkers such as Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, who both rejected the notion of fixed identity and meaning. In particular, Foucault's analysis of power and discourse in shaping individuals' subjectivities influenced Butler's work. For Butler, power does not simply oppress individuals but is productive, meaning that it creates and sustains identities through discourses and norms. These norms are internalized by individuals, leading them to perform their gender in ways that conform to societal expectations. Critique of essentialism. A central aspect of Gender Trouble is Butler's critique of essentialist feminist theory. Essentialism refers to the idea that there is a universal, unchanging essence of womanhood or femininity, which is often linked to biological sex. Butler argues that essentialist feminism fails to account for the diversity of women's experiences and identities. By focusing on fixed categories of identity, essentialist feminism limits the potential for challenging the norms that enforce traditional gender roles. Butler asserts that gender is performative and fluid, not an essential characteristic that people are born with. This view rejects the idea that there is a natural or pre-existing reality of gender that exists before it is expressed. In this way, Butler's work challenges the foundational assumptions of both feminist theory and traditional gender norms. By deconstructing the binaries of male/female and masculine/feminine, Butler opens up the possibility for a broader range of gender expressions and identities that do not conform to the fixed categories of the past. Feminism and Subversion of Identity. Butler's Gender Trouble also explores the relationship between feminism and the subversion of identity. She argues that feminism must be willing to question and destabilize the categories of sex, gender, and sexuality in order to create a more inclusive and radical form of resistance. The book suggests that feminism cannot continue to rely on binary categories such as male and female, nor can it assume that gender identity is determined by biological sex. Instead, feminism must be willing to engage with the complexity and multiplicity of gender identities and to challenge the social norms that uphold the traditional gender order. Butler believes that subverting these norms can create the potential for more flexible and diverse expressions of gender. By questioning the norms that sustain the categories of male and female, feminist theory can expand to include those whose identities do not fit within these conventional frameworks. This idea also aligns with Butler's broader view of power, which she argues is not simply oppressive but also productive. In this sense, feminism becomes a tool for disrupting the normative structures that govern gender and identity, allowing for the possibility of new forms of self-expression and resistance. Intersections with post-structuralism and queer theory. Butler's work has deep connections with post-structuralist theory, particularly in the way she interrogates fixed notions of identity. Like other post-structuralist theorists, Butler rejects the idea of stable, unified subjectivity and emphasizes the role of language and power in constructing identities. In this sense, Gender Trouble is a key text in the development of queer theory, which challenges the dominant understandings of sexuality and gender. Queer theory, which emerged in the early 1990s, draws on Butler's work to examine how non-normative sexualities and gender identities are constructed and resisted. Butler's ideas about gender performativity are particularly important for queer theory because they challenge the binary thinking that has traditionally shaped ideas about sexuality and identity. Queer theory seeks to break down the rigid distinctions between heterosexual and homosexual, male and female, and other binary oppositions that have historically defined the terms of identity. Butler's argument that gender is performative opens up the possibility for people to resist these normative categories and explore new ways of being. This aligns with queer theory's goal of creating more inclusive spaces for diverse forms of sexual and gender expression. The impact of gender trouble. Since its publication in 1990, gender trouble has had a profound impact on feminist theory, queer theory, and cultural studies. It has been widely discussed and debated, and its ideas have been both celebrated and critiqued. Butler's concept of gender performativity has influenced a wide range of disciplines, including sociology, anthropology, political theory, and literary studies. Scholars and activists have drawn on Butler's work to explore the ways in which gender identity is constructed and maintained in different cultural contexts. One of the key implications of Butler's work is the recognition that gender is not a fixed or pre-given characteristic, but something that is socially constructed and maintained through repeated performances. This recognition has led to greater acceptance of diverse gender identities and expressions, as well as a broader understanding of the ways in which gender intersects with other social categories such as race, class, and sexuality. Butler's work has helped to pave the way for a more inclusive and intersectional feminist theory that is better equipped to address the complexities of contemporary gender and sexuality. Judith Butler's Gender Trouble remains one of the most important works of feminist theory in the 20th century. Its radical approach to gender as performative and socially constructed has reshaped the way scholars and activists think about identity. By challenging essentialist notions of gender, Butler opens up new possibilities for understanding and subverting the norms that govern gender and sexuality. Her work has had a lasting impact on feminist thought, queer theory, and cultural studies, and continues to be a key text for anyone interested in exploring the complexities of identity in the contemporary world.